joining me for this next session, I get to welcome Paul Polman, a business leader, investor, philanthropist, and the former CEO of Unilever. He is also the co-author of Net Positive, How Courageous Companies Thrive by Giving More Than They Take. Please give him a round of applause. Hello. Nice to see you.
How you doing?
Good.
You guys have been busy.
We have been busy, but short anecdote, Paul Polman was at the very first food tank event ever here in New York City, and it was on food loss and food waste 1 million years ago. Nice to see you.
Man, you have an amazing memory. And you don't change, I'm getting older.
Oh, I've changed.
But it's, I was just talking to the wonderful lady waiting coming in, and she was saying 2 years ago you only had one or 2 days, and now you have the whole week. So it shows that things are changing. You know, you should feel good about that. Although there's a lot to do, it seems that we're getting more on the agenda.
Yeah, there's a lot to do, and you've been doing a lot. I want to, before we get into the other things that you do, regenerative school meals have been a really important issue for you, and I want you to tell us about why.
Well, that's very simple, because I think obviously in our own lives we do a lot of things, and one of the things I do is try to get as many kids in school that are blind or deaf-blind, and we have a big foundation in Africa to achieve that. And when COVID came, for example, most of these kids go to school obviously because they have higher ambitions. But one of the reasons they go into schools also is because you're providing school meals, and they just simply don't have that at home. If you just look at the statistics, there are probably, you probably have every session quoting different numbers, but there are probably about 300 million children malnourished in this world. And if you see how many are deprived of school meals, you probably get to 150, 200 million, and for many it's a reason. So you have to fight for that. And with Unilever, when I had the honor to chair that company, we had incredible programs with the World Food Program, probably the biggest ones that were around at that time, to be sure that these kids have school meals. And so it's a human dignity and respect. Everybody has the right to food. So that's probably the most important thing. But it also makes good economic sense. If you develop these communities, you have to start there. And you probably, with the work we've done, for example, in, let me think of an example, or Indonesia or Brazil are probably the better examples now, Kenya, etc. You can see the economic effect could be 2-3% of your economic growth right there. So what I like now about it, I'm on the board of the Rockefeller Foundation, which is a big honor. And Rockefeller has made a commitment for 100 million children with school meals, or between now and 2030, basically, and put the money behind it to achieve that. But what we are thinking much more is how do you use that to galvanize a broader change in the sorry about that, how do you galvanize a broader change in the food system? And that's, nowadays, the thinking a little bit broader about systems change is needed to make these lasting changes that we haven't been able to make. I mean, as long as I live, people talk about how broken our food system is. 800 million people going to bed hungry, not knowing if they wake up, 160 million people stunted, 30-40% of food being wasted, land being degraded, forests being cut, obesity on the other side. I mean, if you come from Mars, you certainly wouldn't call us the most intelligent species. But and yet we have not been able to fix it, despite all the attention. We're hardly spending money on it. It's one of the most underfunded areas, school meals included, obviously, but even if you see the money that goes to food, we might get a little bit more awareness now. If you look at Climate Week here, you looked at London Climate Week, you look at now what we're doing for the COP, and, food is really on the agenda now. Yeah. And people are starting to understand that you can't solve climate change if you don't change the food system, for example. 30% of the problem, 30% of the solution, a 60% swing, and guess what? With a relatively low amount of investment and a fast result. And as we struggle in the other areas, this is an area that you tend to get more alignment, irrespective of the political colors that you have. And you can drive more in the middle instead of being sidetracked by the two gutters of the left and the right. So I think that is, it's becoming actually not only more urgent, sadly, but it's also more in our reach to do something about it. Sorry, long answer.
No, that's great. Definitely more in our reach. What I think about is if school and regenerative school meals especially make, economic sense, they provide dignity, they provide economic opportunities for farmers, they provide this opportunity for better nutrition and good tasting food, then why aren't more governments, why aren't more philanthropy organizations getting behind regenerative school meals or school meals in general?
Well, there are. So the world is spending about 80 billion on school meals. The government's procurement on meals, 70% is going to school meals, and over 400 million people are getting school meals. And even in my time in the Netherlands, we had school meals, and these programs still exist in many countries. It's just that in the developing markets, these numbers are again dropping off to in the low 20s. So that's the issue. That is an issue of lack of funding, lack of consistent programs. And when you do it, you could see it in Brazil. There was very good program under the first Lula government, and then Bolsonaro came, gave it less attention. Then you have to restart it again to some extent. But if you do it well, you can see what happens. And so now you have governments like, let's say, Kenya making big commitments, or governments like Indonesia making big commitments. And why isn't it going faster? Because it's darn difficult, especially when it involves many different ministries. You want to do it right. You want to, what is quality food? What is local sourcing? What is regenerative agriculture? How do you take all the middlemen out and the people that have their own interest in current systems? How do you do it without corruption? How do you build capabilities on the ground? So President Prabowo, for example, I've talked to him now several times, and he has great ambitions. He took me to some of the efforts that they're doing in setting up this network to reach probably about, what did he tell me, 82.9 million people or so. These are big numbers. That's 5 times the population of my country. And, setting up with the nutrition agency, the capabilities, and getting the best practices in, and getting people on the ground being trained. They've had issues with speed of scaling up that affected the quality of the food and the school meals, or, the waste where they deliver the school meals, but already, it's too much or not enough, or getting the farmers or the local cooperatives up and running and getting the middlemen out. This is hard work. And that's why we have to co-own that. We cannot just say, they made a major commitment and spending a lot of money. Right now probably my guess would be around 4 billion going up to 10 billion to make it really work. But your money has to come from somewhere. So then, he saves on other areas, but the students go in the streets because they feel there's less money for them because it goes to the school meals, et cetera, and the thing goes. So these are complex systems changes that, so we can all sit here and say, snap your fingers because it's so obvious, make it happen.
Sure.
But where the world falls short is, we are not short of people that tell us what to do, we're short of people that are doing. And that's where we need to focus on, to be honest.
I agree. It is such an opportunity, school meals, for silo breaking, and you talked about that a lot. But the return on investment on school meals is huge. Can you talk about that?
Well, you can quote numbers, and anybody has a number because they need to issue reports. But so I have a little problem of that. They say, for example, $1 invested in school meals gives a $30 return. Is a number I saw in Mariana's report. Quickly coming over here, reading it in my Uber. But if it is so obvious, why isn't everybody jumped on it? So,
right.
But the fact is, we all know that. We know that if we feed people properly and avoid stunting and provide people with the right nutrition, we tend to perform better than if we're hungry. So, and it gets back into education, it gets back into the resilience of local communities. Is it 2% of GDP, 3% of GDP, 4%? I don't know. If I listen to all the NGOs and all the problems we need to solve and all the GDPs that we grow, if I add it up, we probably should be growing 60% a year right now. So for me, it's more important, it's the right thing to do.
Right.
We all need it. And we're better able to perform, and then different regions will have different developments as a result of it. But it certainly is a payout. When I was running Unilever, I was spending about 10 million, and we never advertised that, but we were spending about 10 million on school meals a year, and we were the biggest donors to the World Food Program. I never questioned that. We were a 50 billion company. You have to, you miss the point of why you're here in this world if you can't spend 10 million on what's important. So, were they all going to use our products afterwards because we did Knorr this, or we did, our butter brands there, or whatever it is? I couldn't give a hoot. I only knew that if these communities would be successful, that we had more chances as a company to be successful, and that tends to be true in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing some, yeah, please. The momentum is really building. At the first UN Food Systems Summit, we saw the launch of the School Meals Coalition, and that momentum is really important right now at the global level, especially with what we've been talking about before with the disruption of international aid. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, so a global coalition against poverty and hunger. Lula sort of champions that on the G20. Everybody sits around the table, says yes, 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 and then they go back home and do other things. So out of that, you get the Global School Meal Alliance. They're at a meeting now in Fortaleza. There are over 100 countries. Again, reconfirming the commitment a few weeks ago. 70, 80 countries were there, and different ministries. Obviously, it's a whole of society issue, so you have to be able to put systems in place. We talked about different ministries need to get involved, nearly all of them, because goal number one is poverty alleviation, goal number two is food security, and that's not surprising, because when we developed the Sustainable Development Goals, it permeates in all these 17 goals. But it also means it's all of our business for all of us. So you're in the Ministry of Forestry, you're Minister of Environment, you're the Minister of Climate, Minister of whatever, Finance, and the list goes on. You probably have directly or indirectly a link to this. So putting that all together is where the challenge is, and coordinating that, because it's that silo approach often, and that's also the challenge in many of the countries where they're implementing it. And often capabilities are missing, and we need to spend time on that to put those things in place. But that coalition is being formed. You have the accelerator, the World Food Program, which is under tremendous strain and under tremendous lack of funds at a time that the world has more disasters, and if you hear the stories and what they do, and it's heartbreaking, and yet we know we need to do it. You cannot, besides all the things that are happening to people in Sudan or in Gaza and in many other places, 6 areas in the world where there's now outright genocide. There's no other word for it. And if you then have to make a choice which area you're going to work in, or which people you give the 1 meal a day, they're well beyond the ability to give people 2 meals a day or 3 meals a day. So these are tough things that are the realities of today's world. And the world can sit here and say, we need to do this or that, or make these big promises on television. But, we're falling far short at the political level now on what is needed. And one of the things that needs to happen in the COP, not only on climate and come in with your NDCs and make them more ambitious than what you have, but also on the specific areas of the basic necessities for humanity, including food. So this is a moment where, frankly, you see it in New York as well, where society and business, may I say, some of you might disagree with, which is fine with me, but business and in general and society is running well ahead of the governments right now. And that gap, unfortunately, is getting bigger, and that's not helping us, and we can't afford it. So I know that. So then you say, okay, I'm desperate, I'm hopeless, and I'm depressed, and that's okay. Be that for a minute, but then it's not probably giving you the best energy to take action. So then snap out of it and say, what can I do in my circle of influence, and how can I make use of the situation today and drive it, even farther and harder with the people I work with. And I see more coalitions being formed. I see more energy being created. I see more results on the ground as a result of that. And that's anyway how society should function. I'm not saying I'm against governments. Of course, we need governments. But if they fall short, we need to, step up. If they step down, we step up. And I think that's happening. Climate Week in the UK, people said that's the end of London Climate Week, because we had twice as many people in the UK as the year before, and everybody said we won't go here and you won't let us in and all that stuff. But now there are twice as many people in New York as well. There's something happening, we need to recognize that. And that's very good energy. So I think let's build on that energy and show that we can do it. I mean, we don't have many opportunities anymore, but on the other hand, if we can say we just fixed it once and for all, man, that's worth living for.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your advice. It's okay to mourn, but as my mom would say, like you did, snap out of it because we have work to do. So thank you.
Yeah, but it takes courage. It's not that easy, obviously. So, but you know what I don't know. I just rattle on here, but you know, yesterday as well. I mean, I was in the UN. I heard the thing, and the whole day people talk about it, and you know. Who cares if an elevator doesn't work or a teleprompter doesn't work or one guy rattles around everything that he doesn't like? I mean, who cares? You know, why not just keep going on what we know how to do and do well and not get sidetracked by that? So it takes a little bit of courage because nothing worse, I think, than just your life's being dominated by a bully that you don't agree with in the first place. So, you know, no, but it's just not worse anymore, and yet, sorry about it, we're talking it again. But just snap out of it and move this reactive fearfulness that is crept into all of us into hope and optimism and courage. And that's probably the missing ingredient. If there's one thing that has brought some light on the last 6 months or 9 months is how few leaders we have in society that are stepping up, and silence is not an option here, or hiding behind others is not an option anymore. It's really serious where we find ourselves. So encouraging more people to work together, to speak up is probably, you know, and fight for what is right is probably the most important thing we can do right now.
Absolutely. That's a great call to action. I guess my last question for you is, we're a month and a half or so before COP. What do you know, this is called the implementation COP. We have to, you know, do things at this COP, not just talk about them. What do you want to see happen?
Well, real things. And I think, you know, multilateralism is not anymore what it used to be, and you can't get agreements with all the countries now. We couldn't get it on plastics. We couldn't get it on, frankly, on the oceans. We have a good agreement that we got more than 60 countries to sign it, but you don't get many more. You know, and financing is difficult for these things. So at the multilateral level, we don't. But I was at the WTO last week because I'm advising Ngozi. You know, trade is doing very well everywhere outside of the U.S. and it's becoming stronger, and the settlement procedures work. And let's just focus on the people who want to do things and do more with those people, and not get sidetracked. Then you might say, yeah, but we need a country of this size. Of course we need a country of this size. But there are many things we can do. This country is also aware that they need to do adaptation, that they need to do resilience building, that they need to build new grids, that, you know, that green energy is cheaper. I mean, they can talk what they want, but 95% of the energy that has been installed in this country in the last 10 years is green energy. They can shout, drill, baby, drill, but nothing is being drilled right now because it doesn't make economic sense. You know, they can say keep the coal plants open, but the owners are screaming because it costs them $1 million a week to keep it open. So are we going to be worried about that and letting our lives be dominated? Or are we going to work with the states or the cities or the projects that are increasingly coming up that are incredibly exciting and see if we can scale them faster? So let's do that. Let's pull ourselves up, not drag ourselves down. And Berlin has to be like that. There are a few objectives that need to be there. Countries are a little bit slow out of the starting blocks with their NDCs. We only have about 30, which is kind of amazing still. But you know, if we can get some big wins in Brazil on food, which I think is possible.
Yeah.
Momentum is really building on regenerative agriculture. Commitments are going up. I think we are getting closer to a tipping point than we give ourselves credit for. And also partly with technology, you know, as you know, there are things happening at a speed that perhaps very soon we can obsolete these herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers that have been one of the causes of now exceeding 7 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. You know, I've seen some incredible ideas floating around here. So Berlin has to be about that and has to be about tangible and delivering those. The one thing that we need to see if we can get this Tropical Forest Forever Fund going, and you know, it needs 25 billion of commitments, 100 billion of private money is not going to be easy, but you know, Brazil was courageous. They did a lot of thinking on how to set it up. They pledged $1 billion themselves, so we need to give it a chance, because if we can find a mechanism of providing livelihoods for people and and paying for standing forest and protecting this 1 billion hectares more or less, doing that with a fund that can generate 4 billion a year in a very smart way on a continuous basis, make sure that 20% of that money goes to indigenous peoples, which have the knowledge and obviously the stewards of that land. So I think that's very exciting, and if we can make that happen, then we can also change our food systems and get a multiplier effect. You know, you look at Indonesia now. It's a country that needs to import food. It's not a good thing if you need to import food. A country of that size should be independent. So then they cut down forests to get more food estates. So, you know, then we say, no, you have 10, 12 million acres of degraded land. Why don't you use that first? But it's all painful to do that. But if we can get an incentive, financial incentive, where they actually get rewarded and can use that money to provide alternative livelihoods, which there are plenty of opportunities there, then we can change real systems. And I think people are finally, at least in my little life and little exposure that I have to this wonderful world, I think people are finally starting to understand that and see the benefits of that. And that's a sweet spot I like to operate in, and certainly keeps me alive, hopefully, for a long time to come.
I hope so. Thank you, Paul Polman. Let's pull ourselves up, not down. Give it up for Paul Polman. Thank you. Thank you so much.